Welcome to Hustle and Flow with Heather Hubbard, episode number 17. Hi, I'm Heather Hubbard, and I was a litigator, partner, and practice group leader at an AmLaw 200 firm. I know what it takes to rise to the top. I also know all too well the toll it can take on your personal life. So how do you shine bright without burning out? How do you embrace your ambition without selling your soul? You're listening to the Hustle and Flow podcast. Hello, I am your host, Heather Hubbard, and thank you so much for joining me today. So we're talking about dirty laundry, and I'm not really talking about, your chores around the house or anything piling up, although that might be true. I want to talk today about the dirty laundry that we all have as attorneys, but we're not allowed to talk about. There's an unwritten rule that you keep your personal life to yourself. And there's an unwritten rule that you show up with this image of perfection to your community and to other lawyers in the bar. And I've been talking about it a lot lately with just some clients, and it's a disturbing trend. It's one I just noticed, although it's obviously always been there. So I was in Philly this past week for the Leadership Council on Legal Diversity 1L Summit. And I was speaking to a group of law students that had just completed their first year. And it has been so long since I've been in a room full of law students. And they were so bright-eyed and eager and enthusiastic and thought that they could do anything and everything was possible. And I loved it. I was totally soaking up their good vibes and energy. But there were two questions that were asked that really bothered me. Not because they asked them, but because I think they represent where this journey starts, and it just snowballs from there. So here's the first question. There was a young woman that asked, if we thought, because I did this presentation with someone else, and the student asked if we thought that our degrees, because we went to, top 20 law schools, and our background at large law firms impacted our ability to be successful. Because she is not at a top tier law school, and just being in a room full of other lawyers or law students that had these amazing resumes from these top law schools, and then, their speakers also had impressive resumes, it made her feel really insecure. And she was concerned about her ability to succeed given her law school, given her resume. And I thought, wow, this starts early. This starts really early. This belief that we're not good enough and comparing ourselves to others and struggling to fit into a room where you don't think you belong. And so she was already projecting out that she might not be as successful as others simply because of the law school that she was attending. And obviously we encouraged her that that wasn't true, but that was her perspective. And the other question came from a young Black man who was asking, how do you go about networking or walking into a room full of what seemed to be, rich, sophisticated, well-educated attorneys when he had never met an attorney before going to law school. And he felt completely like a fish out of water and said, I feel really uncomfortable being in those situations because I'm worried I'm going to say something or do something that is completely inappropriate. And I don't know the rules of this high society fancy profession. And the truth is, I doubt that everyone in the room actually comes from that background, but that's the perspective. And these are first-year law students already feeling like they're not good enough, that they don't belong. And how do you show up in a way that allows you to be accepted without being rejected because of your background or your personality or just not knowing the ropes? And it really made me sad to see them already start to lose some of that self-confidence, because I will tell you, I think most law students, when they start, are full of confidence. And a lot of them still are, right? I said that they think anything is possible, and they do. But they do feel like imposters. And it occurred to me that this does start in the law schools, and especially with OCI, on-campus interviews, because we have these, I think every school does this, and they've got good intentions, but what they do is they say, okay, here's how you do your interview, and it's about etiquette, and here's how you sit, and don't eat the cherry tomato when you're in the interview, and make sure that your nail polish is this, and your heels are this height, and make sure that, you're wearing a blue or a black suit, nothing else. I mean, the rules are crazy, and you start to think, oh my gosh, I don't want to screw something up. And so image is so important, right? This is what they teach us. Image is critical. Don't be yourself. Conform. And I certainly remember that. I remember feeling like I didn't belong and trying to trick people into believing that I did by following all of those rules. And oh my gosh, if I could just go back and tell that law student, Heather, that trying to be something you're not in order to fit in doesn't work in the long term because one, it's going to kill your soul if you're constantly pretending to be something that you're not. And two, that stuff really doesn't matter that much. And if it does, I'm not sure you want to be at that law firm or that company. But here's the thing. It doesn't go away. I think it gets worse. I mean, the legal industry, we hold each other to very high standards, and we should, right? I know there's a lot of jokes and a lot of people that don't like attorneys, but we are a very noble profession. It requires not just a legal education, but, we have character and fitness tests, and it's a really big deal to get your license, to be considered part of one of the three branches of government. Even if you're not, a judge or making the law, you're still part of that. And lawyers for the longest time have been part of politics and really the ones paving the way for justice and reform and progress in society. And so we're held to this higher standard. We have these high ethical standards, and there's nothing wrong with that. But sometimes the standard is so high that it's not achievable, or at least not sustainable. I'll explain that in a little bit, but I want to touch on something first. So outside of the ethics, outside of, being held to a higher standard, we're an opinionated group. I mean, we judge other people. We are highly critical, and we gossip. I mean, I don't know if other industries are as bad as us, but we gossip like crazy, right? And you never want to be the subject of that gossip. So we keep things really close, right? Our image is important. And so we keep anything that doesn't look great, we try to keep it as close as we can. And we've talked about this before, and I'm sure we're going to talk about it again, but it needs to be repeated that attorneys suffer from higher levels of depression, alcohol abuse, and suicide. And I think there are many different factors that contribute to those statistics. But I wonder how much of our high standards, I wonder how much of our judgment and our criticism leads to depression and alcohol abuse and suicide. As a coach and consultant, I now see more than ever, from whether it's from a client or whether it's from a law firm needing help with a lawyer, there are so many lawyers struggling with issues that they're not working through, and they're not able to because they're keeping it all to themselves. They're not opening up. They're not sharing that they're struggling. And then it, hits a crisis. And sometimes that means, that someone takes their own life because they don't see any way out. And I think we've got to own that. I think we have to take responsibility for the fact that that is the culture we have created in our industry. And I want to be involved in changing that. And I hope you do too, because I think we all have a role to play. So here's the thing. No one is perfect. We are all human. We are human first and foremost. Yes, we're attorneys, but we are human. And what that means is we all make mistakes. We all make mistakes. And we all have dirty laundry. There is not an attorney out there that does not have some type of dirty laundry. And it's not because they're an attorney, it's because they are human. We all have things that we don't want others to know. I know I do. And it's one thing for that dirty laundry to be in the past, right? So when you go to, get your bar license, depending on the state, it can be pretty rigorous and you have to disclose a ton of stuff, and people freak out that they're not going to be able to get licensed because of it. And I know people that have really struggled with getting their license because of some of their past behaviors. And by the time you get to law school, it's generally, over and done with, and yet it comes back up. And it is so painful to have to go through that. Because, it continues to haunt you and it continues to follow you, and you don't want anyone to know about, because you don't want the judgment, you don't want the gossip, and you want to be seen as a good lawyer. You want to be seen as a pillar of society. And so I think that holds people back. I will tell you, I know of a lot of people, myself included, that will not run for office, that will not get involved in politics because, and this isn't even legal industry, because of the culture we have created in society. Our need to dig up dirt on people and mudsling is completely out of control because it assumes that there is a standard that you can meet as a human that is not possible. And so it becomes, well, will they figure it out or not? And I know someone that didn't get a position because something like that came out, and they were then honest. They wanted it to get out first. But it's hard. It's hard when you have to be honest about things that you're embarrassed about, that you regret. I think it's even worse when your dirty laundry is in the present, right? You aren't young and stupid. You've not learned from your ways. It's going on now. It's going on right now. And if you think about what your own dirty laundry is, or you just know friends, you know that it can be any number of things. Now, because no one talks about it, we tend to think that when we're going through something that we're the only one, and that if anyone finds out, it will completely ruin our reputation. And so we keep it to ourselves. And so, the number one I think that comes up is finances. There are a lot of attorneys that get overextended. They overspend, they have large credit, they have debt, and they get in over their heads, and they don't know what to do about it. When you're making a lot of money and you are portraying yourself to have a certain lifestyle and you're in over your head, that can feel debilitating. I know attorneys that will tell me, I've not been setting aside my money for quarterly payments to the IRS, and I've not paid in a few years, and I'm now risking my house, my mortgage. And if you, at this moment, are being judgmental or critical, I just want you to be aware of that. I just want you to notice it. It happens. It happens to a lot of people. I know a lot of solos that are overextended and they don't know what to do. They don't know how to get back on track. And I know attorneys that haven't even told their families that they're in over their heads because the families are relying upon that lifestyle, right? I mean, guys, this is hard stuff. This is really hard stuff. And when you're in over your head and you don't see a solution, you're probably not going to go to your partners or your colleagues, maybe even your friends, to say this is going on. You start trying to figure out how you're going to fix it on your own. And when that happens, things generally get worse because you're not making neutral, objective decisions. You are reacting from a place of not just fear, but paralyzing fear. You know, there have been some large law firm deaths over the last few years, and some related to very, very well-paid attorneys getting into some type of financial trouble, and they didn't see a way out, and so they took their life. I mean, we've got to talk about this stuff. And I'm not saying that you go announce it at a bar association meeting, a partner meeting, none of that. But if you're not talking to anyone, if you're not seeing a therapist, if you don't have at least one friend or some type of support group, if you're not getting some kind of help, it's just going to get worse. And no one is perfect. We are all human. And it's not just finances, right? What if you are abusing alcohol or drugs and you don't know how to stop and you're afraid to ask for help because you're afraid of what that might mean for your bar license? Or maybe you're afraid you're going to lose your job. And maybe it's not you. Maybe it's a spouse or a child. And while other attorneys are boasting about how their children are, top of their class, they're valedictorian, they're in all of these sports, and they're going to this amazing college, and maybe your child is pregnant or on drugs or just struggling in school, you may not want to talk about that. You might be really embarrassed about that. And if you're internalizing it and you're afraid to be honest about what's going on in your life, it can be really hard. It can be really hard. And I know from personal experience that you think it's not showing up in your job when you've got personal issues going on, but it is probably impacting your work, even if it's not noticeable to others. And then you have things just like, maybe you're in an abusive relationship. Maybe you're with someone that's verbally abusive or even physically abusive. As an attorney that is seen as someone that is, strong-willed, how do you come out and say that you got yourself into that situation? Because you didn't get yourself into that situation, but I bet that's what you think. How do you say, I need help? I need help. You hide it. You hide it. That's what we do. We learn to hide all of our personal issues. And again, it's one thing for it to be in the past. It is another for it to be going on in the present moment. And sometimes it's not just personal stuff. Sometimes it's work stuff, right? This goes back to we're all human. We all make mistakes. Well, our mistakes can sometimes be really costly. It can mean that we have committed malpractice. It can mean that there is an ethical complaint filed. And that's hard. That's hard. And it's scary. And so, one of the things that the malpractice insurance carriers will say is that the worst thing you can do is try to cover it up. And yet, that's what most attorneys want to do. Because no one wants to admit that they made a critical error. It's very rarely intentional when it happens. And you may not have made an error at all. You might just be accused of something. That happened to me. There was not a complaint filed, but, another attorney accused me of doing something unethical, and there was a hearing on it in our case. And that was really, really hard on me. I knew I didn't do anything wrong, but it was so difficult to move through that. For me, I actually had a much easier time asking my friends to help me out on that one. When it comes to personal stuff, it's much harder, right? But everyone is different. But we do all have one thing in common, and that is that we are humans, and we all make mistakes, and we all have dirty laundry. And it's embarrassing, and we try to fix it on our own. And when we do that and we think there's no way out, that's when we lose perspective. That's when we lose hope. And a few different things happen. One is something does blow up, right? Maybe there is a DUI. Maybe you have an affair and your spouse is bringing all that into the workplace. Maybe you've been accused of something. What generally happens is at that point, law firms and companies help cover it up. Especially the higher up you are. If you are at a law firm, I guarantee that there are stories you don't know about. And then there are stories that are legend, right? But no one talks about them. They whisper about them, but no one talks about them. Everybody knows what happened or thinks they knows what happened, right? And then the rumor mills start and people will be like, well, let me tell you about what this person did, right? So as law firms, we're trying to protect our own. And part of that protection means that we're actually confirming that this stuff can't get out. You've got to keep it a secret. There's a fear of getting help because of what that might mean. And if you ask for help, if you tell your firm on the front end, as opposed to it becoming almost like a PR crisis, well, what if they let you go, right? These are the things that I think go through our minds. And I think it's something we just need to be more honest about. Again, I think that if you have something going on in your life, there's nothing wrong with being careful about who you choose to share with, but having someone to share with and reaching out is huge. So even if that's a therapist, I will tell you, I have many clients that share certain things with me, and I am not a therapist. I am not a counselor. I am not able to provide any kind of medical or mental healthcare advice. And so I encourage them to see a therapist. And there's resistance because, again, there's this perception of, if I go to a therapist, like, what will that look like? There is nothing wrong with that. And as an industry, we have to stop saying that getting mental health checkups and guidance, we can't say that there's anything wrong with that, because there's not. Let's stop projecting that there's something wrong with you or you're crazy if you're going to a therapist. I will tell you, I think I have been going to a therapist for a really long time for many different reasons, right? And part of that is because, I've shared this in a few other episodes, I have a really hard time being vulnerable and sharing with others. And so I've always had a therapist to go to, right? If something comes up, I'm going to a therapist because someone has to know. And you have to get support from somewhere, right? So that's the key, is one, being able to just reach out for help. And so it's one thing if you're actually going through this. It's another when you're not, right? Because there are definitely times where you have nothing going on, right? Hopefully that's most of the time. But I think we have to ask ourselves, are we causing or adding to or exacerbating this culture? And so I think we can think about it in terms of, do we judge people by the way they dress? Do we judge people by their hair? Do we judge people by the way they talk, by the way they present? Are we constantly making critical comments or judgmental comments about other people and their lives? I will tell you, I have close friends that I would never in a million years share my dirty laundry with, because they have repeated on many occasions what they think about people that have dirty laundry similar to mine. And so I would never tell them that. And they have no idea that they are talking about me to my face. And if they knew, they probably wouldn't do that, because it's easy to generalize. And guys, I'm guilty. I'm guilty too, right? I really try to catch myself now, but I used to be much, much worse. We're so opinionated and we're so judgmental and we're so critical that we just make these blanket statements and we have no idea what we're talking about. And you have no idea who in the room is actually experiencing what you're being judgmental and critical about. And that shuts people down. And people have a hard time reaching out and asking for help when what they're hearing from those around them, including those that are closest to them and probably love them the most, when they're hearing that that's unforgivable, that's hard. That's hard. And so we have to, I think, as a legal industry as a whole, if we care about well-being, if we care about mental health, and if we care about not just the satisfaction, but the longevity of our attorneys, I think we have to take ownership of being less critical and less judgmental and holding our tongue a little bit when we want to make these blanket statements so that we're not adding to the problem. So I just want to end. I mean, I feel like this is like a Debbie Downer topic, but it's got to be discussed. In my mind, it's got to be discussed. I do kind of want to end just with one of the things that I do with my masterminds and retreats. I start with an activity called timelines, and it allows people to share information, good and bad, about their lives. And I don't ask people to, share all their dirty laundry, right? But when you go through that process, and when it's done right, you see each other as humans because we project onto others that they've got it all together. We project onto others that they have that fancy law degree. We project onto others that they have that rich background. We project onto others that they're brilliant and that they don't have any problems. We project that they have no clue what a personal problem would look like. And the truth is, we're all human. We all make mistakes. We all have dirty laundry. And when we can gain perspective and when we can relate to others on that human level, it makes relationships so much deeper. And you can help each other in ways that you wouldn't have before because, you've got the armor, you're kind of keeping people at a distance. When you know that they're human too, it allows you to, I guess, just be vulnerable to share with them your struggle so that they can help you. And that struggle may be something really small at work, but if you don't trust others, it's hard to open up. And it's hard to trust others when you think that they're not human, that they are a perfect attorney. And that doesn't exist. That doesn't exist. So, one, if you are going through any issues right now, I encourage you to ask for help. Share with at least one person. And if you are not going through any issues right now, I encourage you to just be a little bit more aware of when you might be judgmental or critical and in a way that is spoken out loud to others that might encourage them to shut down and not seek help. So I hope that we can be a more open culture that does not have these crazy standards and these ridiculous expectations of image. It's unnecessary. So, I feel like I've been preaching today. We've been at church. Okay, so that's it. That's the episode on dirty laundry. And I will be back with you next week on perhaps a more upbeat topic. Thanks for hanging out with me today. Are you feeling stuck or frustrated in your career? Are you exhausted from trying to balance so many competing demands? Do you have big dreams and goals, but no time to focus on them? Then join me in a small group of female attorneys for the Life and Law in Balance retreats at Miraval. They're coming up in June and September. To learn more and register, go to lifeandlawinbalance.com. I'd love to meet you there.